Welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. There is so much noise on the interweb these days about what women should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to their fitness and health. Not only is it all too often tied to shame and fixing our bodies, it can also be incredibly detrimental to our health and wellness overall. The Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast sorts through the BS and offers advice and actionable tactile steps to support and build a better relationship to your amazing body through every stage of womanhood. It aims to break the cycle of keeping women in the dark about their extraordinary machines and revolutionize the way we move, eat, and live so that our daughters and our daughters' daughters look in the mirror and feel exactly what they are: fierce, beautiful, and capable of everything. The revolution starts here. Hello, and welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I am so excited to get it popping with today's topic. But let's start with a couple life updates. There's been some fun changes over here. So I'm going to keep it quick. But the first one, and I'm super duper excited about it, is if you know me outside of the podcast, you know that we recently relocated out of Los Angeles and finally settled on a new home. And I have started teaching in person again. And my goodness, y'all, I love one-on-one. I love group programs. I love it all. Any opportunity to work with women across the board. But it feels good to be inside a class again. So we'll be probably doing a future episode on group fitness, my history with it, the things that I think are really beneficial for so many people. Of course, we'll talk about some of the drawbacks as well, but across the board, group fitness is such a solid way to get started with fitness because you have the energy of the group, you have a workout that's pre-made for you. A lot of the times in gyms that I've worked in the past, people who don't love to exercise looked forward to coming to group fitness, whether it was to see their coaches or to see their friends. It's how I fell in love with fitness. So being back in that space it just tickles me. And then the other thing that I just want to touch on, because it's kind of changed my world, is yoga nidra, y'all. I don't know if you've heard of this yet. And if you have, you're way ahead of me, and congratulations. I, like many women, have certain phase in my cycle when I get little bouts of insomnia. So for me, it happens in my higher estrogen phases, so right around the end of my follicular phase, anywhere from like day 7 to day 12, so maybe like mid-follicular actually. I just, for whatever reason, I can't sleep, and I just am wired. Before I started cycle tracking, this period of my period cycling, menstrual cycle would really stress me out because I didn't know it had anything to do with my menstrual cycle. It just felt super random, and I would panic because at the time when I wasn't tracking, I was managing a gym, and my mornings would start anywhere from 4 to 5 a.m. So if I wasn't sleeping until 3, I would just spend the whole night sort of like staring at the ceiling, stressed that I was not going to sleep at all that night. And that is one of the things that I love the most about cycle tracking for me personally, is that it really has helped me realize different fluctuations in my mood, but also in my sleep patterns. So now when this time comes around, inevitably every month, instead of panic about it, I can just sort of plan for it and deal with it, because I know, like I said, within days 7 to 12, if I'm not sleeping, I don't need to worry. It's not going to be my forever. Obviously, I'd love to sleep, so I've started finding different things to help me with those periods. But one of the things that has been especially helpful has been yoga nidra, which is, and I'm going to butcher this, I should have just done a little research. I'm planning on starting like a mini once a month series called Self-Care Saturdays, where we're going to get some experts talking about some self-care things, and I'll probably do a little deep dive into yoga nidra there. But it's essentially a more or less a meditation practice where it just sort of talks you through the way that our brain moves. So it talks you through different body scan points, little like focus on the fingertips, the space between the fingers. It's just this really beautiful, quick moving, but deeply relaxing type of meditation. And it's great for my brain because it keeps it active enough the whole time that I don't sort of spin out on other topics, which I want to do in meditation. Point is, if you are struggling with sleep, I've also started using it in the middle of the day because I'm not a good napper, but I definitely benefit from downtime because I have a tendency to go. So I've been sliding in like a 10, 20-minute yoga nidra. They have yoga nidra for nap, yoga nidra for sleep. I've been doing one in the middle of my day, and I've been doing one at the end of my day, and it has made such a difference. I have a free app called Insight Timer, and I literally just search yoga nidra for sleep and find however long I want to do it for. So 10 out of 10, do recommend checking that out, especially if you're like me and you have those pops of insomnia throughout your day, or you're going through perimenopause and you're really going through it. At the very least, it gives our brains something to focus on other than maybe that anxiety of, oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping. So that's it for my life updates. If you're in the Twin Cities, shoot me a message at kinsey@RaiderFitAcademy.com and I'll let you know where I'm teaching. We can get you a free class. And if you're visiting the Twin Cities, drop in there anyway. And Yoga Nidra. Okay, team. So let's move it on to today's question because it is such a good one. So big thank you to MR for reaching out with your question. By the way, the question is, how do I balance strength training while training for a race? I love this cue because if you spend any time around this pod, you know that in my book and a lot of well-researched books, strength training is a non-negotiable when it comes to our healthy, vital aging and a smoother transition through perimenopause and beyond until the end of our years. So that being said, there are so many people in this world that have fitness goals that light them up from the inside that have nothing to do with strength training. And I will never, ever be the person who's like, hey, I'm going to need you to stop doing what you love so you can do what I tell you to do. Because here's the thing, anything that excites you to move excites me. I love that. All at the end of the day, I want you to do is start moving and taking care of and enjoying this incredible body that allows us to move in such awesome ways. And that being said, it is still important to tack on strength training along with our goals eventually. So I did a podcast a little while ago about a woman who was getting back into exercise after losing getting into exercise, period, after losing a lot of weight. And she has never exercised, didn't really like exercising, but sort of started falling in love with Pilates. And my thing is, if you find something that you love to do, just stick with it. Stick with it until exercising becomes a habit. And then once you don't really have to think about showing up for your workouts, because for a lot of us, that is a big barrier to entry, getting into a space to work out, making the time for it. So if you look forward to it, like I said at the beginning with group fitness, it's great to start place holding for where we can eventually start to insert strength days. But one of the most common non-strength based goals that I've come across, you guessed it, it's running goals. And as someone who trained for and did my first half marathon last year, I absolutely get it. And yeah, that's right. I talk about strength all the time, but I also enjoy a running goal. It's, in my mind, pretty hard to beat crossing that finish line and getting your medal and your free banana after weeks or months of training. It just is the best feeling. I also train for obstacle courses, which are a mixture of strength and running, so I get it. But when we're training for these running goals, what does that mean for our strength training? Is it even possible to do both, especially as you get up into the longer mileage? I know that our time is precious, and most of us have full-time jobs or are in school or have kiddos or just don't want to spend hours every day working out. So how the heck are we supposed to make time for strength training on top of our race prep? When I was training for my half marathon, my long runs would sometimes be over 2 hours, and that was just for a half marathon. I honestly, to all of you who have done marathons, I commend you and give you a standing O. Side note, when I was training for my half, I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for my full marathon. And then I finished training for my half and I was like, great. I think my body loves to not do more than a half marathon. And that's just a good know myself. But for all of you who train for those longer runs, amazing. Truly. Anyone who trains for any run, amazing. It is dedication when we get to pick a goal. But like I said, running over more than 2 hours ended up being something that I was like, okay, great. This is something that I know for me probably isn't going to be something in my near future. Point is, 2 hours of running is still a very long amount of running. So what do? Do you just stop strength training? I hope you immediately said no. Because come on, you knew I was going to say that. But it does take some planning. And before we dive into the fun stuff, I do need to say right off the top that I am not a running coach. If anything, in the grand scheme of my fitness timeline, I am still very much a baby when it comes to running. So if you're interested in specific running plans to accomplish a race, I humbly invite you to check out resources like Jason Fitzgerald, who I really have a preference for because he has a program called Strength Training for Runners, which is a great place to start for planning out training for runs and races. And he also has some really cool thoughts on, you guessed it, adding strength training in. Personally, I lean a little bit heavier into weightlifting than he does, but I still think that he does a really beautiful and smart job of incorporating cross training. And also, I just love that there's a baddie running coach out in the world who puts an emphasis on how important it is to cross train with strength. But he does offer really good programs for various lengths of races. Nike Run Club app is another great free resource that will actually help build a training program for you based on how many weeks out you are from your race. It doesn't incorporate it into strength training, but personally, I use the Nike Run app, and I really liked it. I obviously know about strength training, so I was able to tailor those in for myself, but it was a great starting point for someone who has never tried to run long distance before. Longer distance, long for me. Anywho, point is, I'm not qualified to break down your miles, but I am going to talk to you about recommendations for how to continue strength training while you're training for running based on both my qualifications as a certified personal trainer and as someone who experienced their own version of trial and error. LOL. First things first. I know I'm a broken record on this, but hear me out. Fitness really is a lifelong journey. And when it comes to maintaining a strength training program, I deeply encourage you to pull out to that 30,000 foot view. When it comes to racing, the majority of us have our sights set on one or maybe two big races annually. I would argue that if you are training for a 5 or a 10K, strength training can actually look pretty similar to if you weren't running, because our weekly mileage in those ranges, it gets to drop a little lower. It becomes more reasonable then that we can slot in 2 to 3 strength training days with weights and or machines. When I was at my 10K pace, I was running about 2 to 3 times per week and strength training 2 to 3 times per week. Generally, my own schedule, and again, I've been working out for about 10 years at this point. Over, I guess. What are years? I've been training probably for like 15 years at this point, but 2 of my days were pure strength training, and then I had a short run day, a long run day, and one of my days would be a half and half where I'd do a sprint run and then I'd train some strength afterwards. I'll talk a little bit more about what that looked like. So I was still only training 5 days a week, and especially as my runs got longer, I really, really needed my rest breaks, my rest days. We always should be taking them, but personally, my body was like, get in the bathtub and live there. So if you love to run and the idea of 3 strength training days makes you sad face, stick to 2 days of strength training at the very least. But I really would not recommend dipping below, especially when we are at that 5 to 10 can, like I said, sort of dial back the miles and add in more strength. Because we need strength training for many things, but especially as we run more. It helps us to protect our joints and our bones, as well as keeps us operating within proper ranges of motion. It allows us to access the correct muscles to fire as we're moving through our runs, and it keeps us balanced across both sides of our body. Hello, single leg exercises. It keeps us injuries-free and strong and maintaining lean muscle mass. It's hugely important. A good way of getting ahead of not missing your strength days, my humble recommendation, you already are probably working within a running plan. Plan your week of workouts ahead of time. And if you love to plan your month or entire race training plan ahead of time. And that's fantastic. Personally, my brain does not work that far in advance, but if it works for you, yee-haw. But this way you can choose the days that you have the most time and energy for your runs and then commit to the days you plan for strength. So I talk about it all the time. Put your workouts on your calendar and stick to them like they're doctor's appointments because they are just as important for your health. One great option, too, that I alluded to a little earlier on is planning 1 or 2 days where you do a run and strength. And if you're new to exercise or newly back, this might be a little too extra. It's a lot of workout, but if you're a little bit more seasoned, a couple of years in, you can do this within about an hour 15 framework. But this presents another age-old question I've gotten a lot over the years. Which should I do first? Cardio or strength? The simple answer is, which one do you want to focus on? So if your goal is strength and you have a shorter, easier run to get some miles in, I would recommend putting your strength first so that you can lean into increasing weights on your lifts while you still have the most energy. If your goal is to do a short run with a lot of high intensity sprint intervals or hills, I would recommend doing your hill first and then finishing with a safe strength option. So instead of shooting for like your personal bests after your run portion, think more in terms of body weight or dumbbell workout with emphasis on single leg movements like reverse lunges, side lunges, single leg deadlifts, or step ups. Or you could do a functional core circuit because that's super duper important both for our lifts and for our runs. Or one of my favorite options is an underactive muscle workout. I know. This can look a lot like mat Pilates, actually, where we hone in on strengthening the stabilizers of the ankle, knee, and hip. So think things like clamshells, inner and outer thigh leg lifts, glute bridge variations, lots and lots of holds and pulses. I have a couple of clients who listen to this podcast. Hello, ladies. They probably hear Underactive Muscle Day, and I know they feel some kind of way because we do them once a month. And trust me or ask them, you may not leave the mat for these workouts, but hot dog, you will feel the burn, and your body will operate so much smoother because of them. So this format is the sandwich of, not sandwich, what is there a sandwich that stacks one on top of, anyway, whatever. This delicious version of run and strength on one day is my humble recommendation for folks training for longer distances who have to run more than 2 or 3 times a week. Because as we start to have to increase our days of running, it cuts down, obviously, on the days that we're able to do more strength focused. This is also the format that Jason Fitzgerald, the strength training for running and expert that I mentioned earlier, he leans into this with his coaching. So finding days after your more doable runs where you can finish your workouts, you can finish with like a 15 to 20 minute workout of body weight, core, and underactive. Your body is going to be so grateful for the cross training. Not to mention, it's going to help combat that lean muscle loss that comes from high volumes of endurance training. And for more information on that, definitely check out episode 18 of this podcast. I'll put it in the show notes where I chat on tips for new runners. But that is a great way if you're running a lot and you're like, I really can't sacrifice a run day, starting to find places you can tack on workouts afterwards. So maybe on your recovery runs, maybe on your shorter runs, like I said, on your sprinting runs, finding times that work within your schedule. And because you're doing shorter workouts, I would say aim for at least 3 that you could do those. So the next part of our 30,000 foot view, it's beautiful up here, is pulling out even further and looking at all the months we aren't training for the race. What? I know. Even athletes do not train for their sport at 100 all year round. They have an off season between big events or the start of their main season. And this is when, even if you're a runner by sport or profession, this period, this off season, is when it's ideal to do the bulk of your strength and conditioning training. Because remember, we do have to lift heavy in order to get the benefits of strength training. Unfortunately, it's not enough to just keep lifting lighter weights or doing body weight once our body adapts to it. So right, real quick, if you aren't sure what your version of heavy is, definitely take a listen to last week's episode 21, which I'll also link in the show notes, where we talk all about how to figure out how to lift heavy for your current phase of your fitness journey to reap those glorious strength training benefits. But my point is, in between races in our off season, this is when that emphasis switches off of bodyweight training post runs and into heavier lifting with weights, working on growing and maintaining lean muscle mass and max strength, working those compound movements. It's where we really start to dig into the meat and potatoes of strength training. So if you are a runner because you love it, amazing, when you're in your off season or not training for a race, I encourage you to flip your training emphasis. So you don't have to quit running, but make your goal to aim for at least 3 full-blown strength days, leaning into heavier, slower lifts. Again, any emphasis on those single leg movements are really going to do you good as you move back into racing. But our goal would be in this phase to look to build both lean muscle mass, because we lose it with chronic endurance training, and to also maximize strength functionally. But also, like I said, feel free to keep running, but maybe just toggle down to 2 days per week, or tack on a short run at the end of a 30 to 45 minute strength day for those extra endorphins. This ebb and flow of your training cycle between leaning into racing and pulling back slightly, but keeping your strength while you're in race prep, and then switching it back to focusing on heavy lifting in your off season. This is how you are going to allow yourself to stay in your running game for as long as you'd like without sacrificing huge losses of lean muscle. And I'm also going to argue, I'm not even going to go there. I'm also going to argue this is how you help to prevent things like knee and hip replacements down the road, because fitness shouldn't cause that kind of wear and tear on our bodies if we're doing the maintenance work along the way. So there you have it, folks. That is my 8.5 cents on how to keep strength training while you're training for a race. And before I sign off and send you on to the rest of your glorious day, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, please, 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 always prioritize listening to your body, especially if you are new to fitness or newly back. The plans that I pitched can be a lot of training. So take rest when you need, eat to support your training. Be so proud of yourself that you even embarked on this goal in the first place. One way that we can kind of break out of overtraining, at least at first, and I've talked about this before, but think of your training. Try to, unless you absolutely have to with work, try to allow yourself to not have to think about your training within 7-day periods. So if you have 5 days of training, you have your 2 runs, your 2 strength, and then your 1 hybrid. If you're getting to the end of your long run and you're like, dang, I need 2 days of recovery, and then you're getting to the end of a strength day and you're like, dang, I need 2 days of recovery, and you're like, oh no, now my workouts don't fit within a week. That's okay. If your schedule allows, let your days just fall where they may and lean into your recovery just as much as you're leaning into your training. Because like I said, for all of us, but especially when we're new or when we're taking on new distances, our body needs time to adapt and recover and respond. So like personally, any time that I jumped up in mileage, I would be exhausted for like 2 days. Again, everybody's body. I have a client who jumps up in mileage like it's literally nothing. Shout out to Audrey. She is my hero. But my body works differently than hers. When I do an increase in my mileage, I need a solid 2 days just to question everything. So listen to what your body needs. Let it be your own journey and support yourself. That is how we stay healthy and vibrant and in it for forever. How thrilling. Last little bit I'm going to say on this whole topic this is a whole topic on its own rather. So I'm crossing my fingers that one day down the line, we're going to get an expert on it. But overexercise presents in many ways in our bodies, especially differently in female bodies. One common way with women that overexercise presents, not always, but sometimes, is in the loss or shortening of our periods. So a great self-care move when you start training, and hopefully we're always doing this, is to track your cycle. And like I said, hopefully you're already doing it, but tracking our cycle so we can tell, making sure that we're staying the same month to month. Nothing's shortening, nothing's out of whack. Plus, you'll get some killer insight into how your body feels during different phases of your menstrual cycle so you can plan accordingly. For example, personally, you're not going to catch me anywhere near a long run, let alone standing, if I can help it, on the first 2 days of my period. So this will help optimize your workouts and take care of yourself all at the same time. Yay for period tracking. What isn't to love? I ask you this. Thank you again to MR for reaching out with this awesome topic. It just tickles me when I get to hear from y'all and what you're working on and what you're thinking about. I know for a fact, MR, that you are not alone with this question. Good luck on your next race. I am cheering you on. I needed to back away from the mic because I get so excited for your goals. But as always, if you have your own questions or ideas for podcast topics, I would love to hear them. Please feel free to reach out at kinsey@RaiderFitAcademy.com. I'm thinking we'll probably start to do some deep dive episodes into perimenopause prep coming up. Hello, ladies in our 30s and 40s. But if you'd like to get a jump on that, go ahead and pop down into the show notes and download your free perimenopause checklist. This is going to be a great resource just for letting you know what we can start doing now to make our lives a little bit or a lot of bit easier once we start transitioning through perimenopause. And if you're already in perimenopause, it's a great checklist of ways that you can help support your body through this transition. And if you're in menopause, turns out all these same rules apply. So check it out, your free guide to feeling better in our bodies for forever. And y'all, I'm just so tickled. We got a new review. You know how excited and humble this makes me all at the same time. Because as always, I know I say this and it just couldn't be more true. It means the absolute world. I'm getting choked up thinking about it, but for real, it does mean the absolute world that you guys take the time to listen, let alone pause to share with a friend, leave a 5-star review, or write a review. Holy cow. It really is just me and this really cute little microphone over here. And your reviews are what are getting this pod bumped up in the algorithm so that more women can start learning about how to take care of and optimize their incredible bodies. So without further ado, pardon me while I butcher this name. In fact, I'm just going to read the letters. DNSIDNWN, love that, writes, "Loving this. I have just discovered this show and I'm loving every episode. I'm thankful she deep dives into women's health. It's important to remember we have cycles and she goes into it. I'm learning a lot." Thank you so stinking much. You have absolutely made my day. And I am so grateful for you for taking care of your body. And I'm so grateful to all of you out there on the other side of this podcast. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your day. Here is to healthy, happy, and vibrant bodies. Until next time, Raiders. Aroo!